Now we're going to use the law of syllogisms. Now, syllogisms is not really complicated if I treat it to you a little bit differently. Now, I'm going to give you the formal definitions, but I want you to follow along. So following, it says, if I have a conditional statement, if P then Q, and I have another conditional statement, if Q then R, that are true, I then can logically conclude if P then R. Now, what in the world am I talking about? Well, let me show you quick in math. If A equals B and B equals C, what do you know? A equals C. Exactly. Now, just think about it combining in this sense. If P equals Q, if P then Q, if Q then R, I can naturally conclude if P then R. Look, A and C. It's the exact same type of idea. So, here's an example of this. If a number is prime, then it does not have repeated factors. If it does not have repeated factors, then it's not a perfect square. If a number is prime, then it's not a perfect square. Why? Because of this repetition right here. And this is the same as having your two B's in a row. So it lets you be able to combine them. So you have to have a hypothesis and a conclusion that are exactly the same. So let's look at the next one. Now we're going to use this to see if we can draw conclusions from this. If you like the movie, then you saw a good movie. If you saw, by the way, that should be saw, a good movie, then you enjoyed yourself. Okay, so if you like a movie, then you saw a good movie. If you saw a good movie, then you enjoyed yourself. What should I be able to naturally conclude? Because notice, one's a conclusion here, the other one's a hypothesis. What do I know? I know, therefore, if you like the movie, then you enjoyed yourself. And I think this is actually easier to understand really than the law of detachment earlier. Let's look at the next one. If two coplanar lines are not parallel, then they intersect. If two coplanar lines intersect, then they intersect at a point. Well, what can I assume? If two coplanar lines are not parallel, then they intersect at a point. So basically, again, it's almost like we can eliminate this middle part right here. And it's because they're being shared. It's kind of like the glue. And remember, it's the idea if A equals B and if B equals C, therefore I know A equals C. It's called transitive property, but it's really the law of syllogisms that we use all the time. Now, sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. So we have to know when it's being valid. Now remember, valid, if you saw this visually, notice we have a conclusion and we have a hypothesis that always match. So if they don't match, it doesn't work. So here's what I mean. Look here. If a number ends in 0, then it's divisible by 10. If a number is divisible by 10, then it's divisible by 5. Well, here do I have? Do I have a repetitious here? Yes. One's a conclusion, one's a hypothesis. I can make a conclusion. So I can make a valid one. So if a number ends in 0, then it is divisible by 5. So that's valid. But look at the next one. It says if a number ends in 6, then it's divisible by 2. If a number ends in 4, then it's divisible by 2. Does it follow the same pattern if A equals B and B equals C? No. These are in the same spot. It doesn't work. There's no kind of overlap connector there. So it's not possible. Because the conclusions of the conditionals are the same. So it doesn't work that way. All right, we have one last example here. Let's see about this next one. Now we can talk about how you can actually combine all of this together. It's just crazy. Look at the following. It said the Volga River is in Europe. If the river is less than 2,300 miles long, then it's not one of the world's 10 longest rivers. If a river is in Europe, then it's less than 2,300 miles long. Well, okay, look at this first part here. You can take it in a couple different ways, and I kind of like thinking about it in parts. Here's the first part. Look only at these two, okay? First part of it, it says, if a river is less than 2,300 miles long, then it's not one of the world's 10 longest rivers. If a river is in Europe, then it's less than 2,300 miles long. Well, notice I have a conclusion, and I have an hypothesis that are same. So I know, based off of this first part, if a river is in Europe, then it is not one of the world's, excuse me, I went ahead of myself there, world's 10 longest rivers. So that's kind of like step number one. I got that. But notice the next thing here. It says the Volga River is in Europe. Well, the Volga River is in Europe lets me know that it's what? Yeah. Now I can use this with it for number two, and I realize, oh yeah, the Volga River is not one of the world's 10 longest rivers. So it allows us to be able to kind of work with it. So this would actually end up being my final conclusion. So I used my two conditional statements with LS to figure it out, my law of syllogisms, and then I used my law of detachment to get my final conclusion. So you can do combinations of these two. Now this seems really hard, so we're only giving you 15 problems, but hopefully it will be enough to get you started.